Hello and welcome back to Woodhill Park again. Just of late I've been repairing and updating my Class 121 Dapol bubble car. It had some issues with the drive shafts, and there's plenty online about this and stuff you can watch to repair the drive shafts. But I'll give you a quick overview of what I did, plus the update to sound. So if you keep watching, hopefully this will be of interest to you. Now, one of the problems with the Dapol 121 bubble car is the drive shafts, and it's quite well known that the metal drive shafts with the plastic pips at the end that engage with like the gearbox, they split usually pretty quick or over time, so they just spin on the end of the metal drive shaft, and because of this your loco's not going anywhere. Most of the fixes online are pretty much the same as what I've done. You can buy new drive shafts, but probably the same will happen again. Now, the plastic pieces at the end split, as I've said, so really all you can do is just glue them on. What I've done is rub them down, rub the drive shafts ends down just a little bit with some emery excuse me, so just some emery paper, just fine emery, you don't want to rough it up that much, just to give it a key, and this means it will give it a grip when you push it on and glue it. And what I did was push them on with super glue, and it's very important to degrease the actual plastic pip which engages with the gearbox, as well as the drive shaft itself. So once you've sort of keyed the ends with a bit of emery paper and degreased it all, including the plastic piece, I then put a little tiny bit of super glue, better if it's a high viscosity super glue, on the end of the drive shaft and push the pip on level, and I do this on both ends, and then you just wait for it to dry. You can use an activator to speed it up, but once it has dried, you can give it 24 hours if you want, if you've got the time, which is probably best. I then roughed the end of the little plastic pip, which is sort of inballed. I rubbed and roughened up just the end of the little plastic pip, and then rubbed a little bit of the shaft so you've got a key between the two, and then very carefully mixed up some quick drying Aradite or just epoxy glue. I mean, you could have other brands, and then a very small amount on the end of the plastic pip and then on the drive shaft, and then just roll this round the drive shaft and over the plastic pip at the end. But ensure that you don't go beyond the diameter of the plastic pip, just a slight covering, so this will hold between the drive shaft and the plastic pip that goes on the end for engaging with the gearbox. And that's all I did really, and you just let that go off and then push it all back in to the motor and the gearbox. I did this on both ends, as both ends were slipping round and this loco was going nowhere. It's a shame that this is a sort of poor design really. This is what you get when you get metal on plastic, and metal expands and plastic doesn't tend to expand with temperature change. So the metal expands and then cracks the plastic, and then you lose grip with the plastic fitting on the shaft. So really just put in another plastic end piece on, it will probably do the same again. So by leaving the split in place but just filling it with some super glue as you push it on, it probably won't do this again, plus it'll be more rigid because it's super glued on rather than a push fit. Anyway, that besides, I sorted that out and it's now driving both ends, no issues whatsoever. But while I was doing it, I thought I would add sound to this, as Hornby's come out with a new sound file for the 121, and I had a spare chip, as these are 21 pin, and I thought I'd have a go at putting sound in it. And I just thought you would like to see how I fitted it in, so I'll take this apart again in a minute. I also added passengers and added drivers into it as well, which I may try and show you how I did it. I wasn't going to do an update on this because just in case it went wrong while I was doing it, but I've been very satisfied with the result, so I'll carefully take it apart somewhat and show you how I installed the speaker and sound chip and maybe a driver or two, because I've got a driver in either end, just so it looks right depending which way it's going. Right, I'm just going to open her up, and with the Dapol model this is fairly straightforward. It's just putting shims down either side where there's tabs that lock the body to the chassis. So you just slide them down just to push the tabs out of the way. I use plastic card sometimes, or this is like an insulated sort of melamine, or melamine I think it was in its day. But yeah, you just need to prise the body off by doing this. There are no screws hold it on. Now this is where I fitted the speaker in and the chip. I actually come up with a novel idea of fitting the chip in, which I'll show you in a second. Thing is, I'm going to have to take it apart to show you. Excuse me. Probably best to take the body off, or the inside chassis off, to show you how I installed it. Oops. There's the offending drive shafts just entering the motor. You can just about see them. I won't show you that, as I've already said. There's a lot online about this, people showing you how to repair them, and my repair was successful, so I'm quite happy with that. But yeah, what I did was fit this Hornby 21 pin sound chip in here, and I plugged in a Stay Alive, and the speaker I used was an 8 ohm iPhone speaker, which you can get from various places, but it's got to be an 8 ohm. You can't use 4 ohm. 4 ohm will damage the amplifier in the sound chip, so 8 ohm only with a Hornby, or a sort of an addition that adds up to 8 ohm, I suppose you could say. And what I did was, the iPhone speaker, I've put a bit of heat shrink over it and made a little bit of a trumpet at the end, and this with a bit of insulation underneath so that nothing can short out with the metal on the iPhone speaker, sits directly on top of the chip. Now, I was a little bit worried about doing that because magnetism and electronic components don't mix, or they never used to. But after reading lately that most components now are very tolerant of any magnetism, it's not really an issue. So what I did, as you can see, was put that on top of the chip, and then it just sits so it's facing this aperture where the factory fitted speaker would have gone, and then plug in Stay Alive, which is an addition that you need with Hornby chips, as they're very temperamental and cut out, so you do need a Stay Alive. And then, in fact, I'm going to have to thread that through first. But you want to tuck all the wires out the way, lose them underneath the chip. And then, as I said, put the speaker on top of the chip, but going into this speaker housing. The reason I'm doing that is because the little trumpet bit of heat shrink on the end of the iPhone speaker will sort of shout into this box, you might say. So the noise will be amplified by the echo of this plastic box that would have been sitting over the factory fitted speaker. So you get a nice echo chamber. and this does improve the sound. From just an ordinary iPhone speaker, it gives it a bit more bass, and for the size of what you can fit in this Class 121, I think it does a really good job. There's no way you can get sort of an Acura gotta say that again. There's no way you can get an Acura Thrash speaker into here without it, well, destroying it really. So I got as far as that, and I thought, well, how am I going to sort of house it? And I thought, when you buy the Hornby sound chips, you get a load of housings, and you get a large housing that I thought would fit nicely over the chip, which it does. I mean, you don't have to cover it, but because you'll see through the windows of like the coach, and you'll be able to see the chip, I thought, what's better to cover it with than a black box? So I cut it down. I think I lost about 5mm off the end, and I kept the lugs for the screws. And what I did, if I screw the inner chassis back, which is now sort of pinching the speaker just lightly and holding it in place. Tiny little screws, they can be really fiddly to get hold of, especially when I'm not using my magnifier, as it would get in the way and you wouldn't be able to see what I'm doing. So these tiny little screws in a pair of tweezers, and then screw the inner chassis back in. And I took a load of rather cheap sitting down people or figures and amputated all their legs like you do to get them to sit down. And I thought, well, I'm not going to be too fussy about it, because once they're all in there, you just want them to look like people. So they really are cheap ones really, but they'll do the job. And as this bubble car lights itself up anyway, so it's got lighting, and the light's on all the time, so you're going to see in there, and it will look silly if there's nothing in there. So I thought I'd crowd it out with some cheap people, which I've done. Right, back to the housing. Now that's on, I just ensured all the wires are tucked underneath. Oh, and I forgot to say, I notched out a little bit here to allow for, I'm going to tilt it like that, allow for the socket that's underneath the sound chip, which the wires come out of it for the Stay Alive. So I just notched a little bit more out for that. I then put this housing over the top that I cut down, which fits rather nicely, and then got my little what are they? Got the name of them. It was called something like a pinch vise at one time, but my drill holder, just a hand drill holder, if I can find the camera, and got a small size drill, and then just drilled into this plastic chassis, and then found a couple of little screws that would fit in there. So I then screwed it down. I mean, I probably didn't have to, because it's in there, wedged in there quite tightly between these plastic parts. But I thought, why not? Because I've kept the lugs, I might as well use them. So that's in there quite secure. That covers the chip, but it's not smothering it, because you don't want to smother the chip because it could overheat. But it's in an open housing that breathes through the bottom of the chassis, you might say. So as it's travelling along, it probably gets a certain amount of airflow in there. This being black, like I said, you won't see through the windows. You actually see the existing grey chassis more than you will this. And I then had to fit a stay alive, and that was the only other thing really left to do. And this does have to be a little bit visible through the window, but because it's black, it's got black heat shrink on it. I think I got this particular stay alive from Road and Rails. I can't remember if it was originally sold by DCC Concepts as well. But yeah, I just put some black tack in the corner to hold the wires and cover the wires, really, because there's a blue wire and a black wire, and the blue wire stands out a little bit through the window, so a little bit of black tack over it, it makes it disappear. And then the capacitor itself, or the capacitors, have got black heat shrink on anyway, so this tucks the wires neatly out of the way. And I suppose I'll show you how I put a driver in, because they're not particularly easy to do, really, put the drivers in. There's a certain way you have to do it, and I'll show you how I come up with a solution for that. But yeah, the sound's in there now, and it's got its own little sound chamber, which helps with the sound, like I said. Now, to put a driver in, you need to turn the body over and hold it from being damaged. And there's, if I zoom in, there's 3 little tiny screws, and I didn't even notice them, and I wondered why this plastic housing didn't come out, because they look like they're not, it's all attached somehow, but you don't realise these are screws, and they are really tiny. So when you take them out, you need a pot or something, just so you don't lose them, because they need to be in place for electrical contact for the lighting. But yeah, the first thing you do is undo those 3 screws. And then with a pair of tweezers, very carefully remove them. Yeah, got me shaking. That's how small these things are. Yeah, just put them in a pot, and because they're so small, they tend to stick with magnetism to the tools, so you have to be careful you don't drop them. Anyway, I'll zoom out, it's a bit close, and then take the remaining screws out. 3 of these to remove, as I said. Right, the screws are out of the way and safely in a little container. Now you need to get in here. I don't know if I can show this that well, but there's a lug either side that goes into the body of the cab housing, and you need to relieve that either side. once you've done that, you keep it in a position where it's not going to lock itself back in again, and then just pull straight up, and out comes the cab, or the seating of the cab. Now the driver, if he was to just cut his legs off like you traditionally do and sit him in place, would be too high, and as these seats don't seem to be in sort of scale position, they seem to be a bit too tall, and what I found was best was to actually cut the seat off and then just take the stand of the seat, showing on camera is very difficult, take the stand of the seat off by cutting it off, and then also make sure the floor is flush, and then stick the seat directly onto the floor. Now that lowers it down by just the right amount to have him sitting in the right place in the cab. So what I tended to do, zoom in a little bit, what I tended to do was to stick him on the seat, or super glue him on the seat, after I'd trimmed the stand off the seat and then flatten the floor, and then stuck him with the seat on his bum onto the floor. So if I turn it round, you should be able to see what I mean. Don't know if the lighting is in the right place, but yeah, you can't see any stand of the seat because he's sitting on the seat directly on the floor. So you still keep the seat in place, but it's a hell of a lot lower than that one over there, as you can see, and that puts him just in the right position to have his knees underneath the front console and be at the right height in the cab when you put him back in place. So I did this either end, and it's the same procedure either end, and I think he sits nicely in there. He looks like he's working with the controls, and it's just at the right height now. So I'm going to put that back in, which is the reverse procedure really. So you just pull the sides of the body away a little bit and then push down to locate the cab again. Being sure to get the lugs in the sides clipping. That's it. Once that's clipped in, you get those tiny screws again and very carefully put them back in place, hopefully without losing them. It's probably one of the most fiddliest bits, is these little tiny screws. But I think this is pretty good, a pretty good sort of technique for electrical contact actually. You're not going to get a problem with the electrics when you've got screws holding contacts down, unless you get any corrosion underneath. But so the lighting design in this is very good in my opinion. Don't overdo the screws when you tighten them, because you'll just strip them, as they're only going into a plastic or a fiberglass board in this case. Oops. Yeah, really are tiny, so locating your screwdriver in the head is very hard really. You also need a very small posi screwdriver for these, so make sure the screwdriver fits the head before you start playing about with the screws. so you don't chew the head up. Right, that's done. So I've got, if I can hold it round the right way, I've got a driver in that end and a driver in that end. So the number one end, which is going to travel that direction most of the time, is occupied down the other end. Now, just need to put the body and the chassis back together, which is very straightforward. I glued the figures in primarily with Copydex, as this doesn't damage the plastic. Might have done the old one with Evo stick, because Copydex is a very light glue and water based, so it doesn't damage things, but you know, it's easy to peel off, so if you knock the figures they'll come off, but they won't come off in general use. So I thought that way was a way of not damaging the plastic. And so this is all screwed together now, and you just need to put this around the right way, which in this case is this way up. Got everything in place, and it fits nicely, it clicks on. You do have to watch the exhaust pipes as you fit it, just to ensure that they're not trapped under the body and the chassis. Right, one was trapped, the other one wasn't, so obviously this will hold the body off the chassis if you don't check. I've got to put the detail in on this, which I'll probably put on both ends, being it's a bubble car. Haven't done it yet, that's a thing I've got to do, but it's still nice to have passengers and sound in this really good looking model really. It's just a shame it's got the drive shaft issue, as it's probably made this model, well, given this model a bad name really, but detail wise I think it's a really good model, and now it's got sound in it, and I weathered it previously. It's a real good addition to my fleet. We'll start her up and give her a little run around the layout, and you can hear what the sound's like, even though you've had a taste of it in the intro. Thanks for watching this little update on what I've just been up to sound wise, fitting this sound into my Class 121 bubble car. Hopefully it sort of helped to somebody out there should they want to do the same. Any rate, I'll be back again soon with my factory and quarry update. I've really turned my factory into a cement factory, and I'll be modifying what I've done as I'm not entirely happy, and I'll be back with an update on how this has come out. So for now I'll say goodbye and I'm off.